Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Thomas Kerr, and today I am answering your questions about my through hike of the Vermont Long Trail. I got a lot of questions, which I was pleasantly surprised by, so thank you for submitting your questions, and I'm going to go through them as fast as possible just because there are a lot. Let's go. Okay, first one. What was your favorite part? My favorite section would be Appalachian Gap to Smuggler's Notch. It's a big section, but there was just so many good views and the terrain was great. If I had to narrow it down though to a specific part, I would say the ridge on Mount Mansfield was amazing. What was your least favorite part? Main Junction to Sunrise Shelter was probably my worst day on trail. It's about 18 miles and just constantly up and down with no summits, no views. Just wasn't great, wasn't my favorite. Would you agree with the long trail description that Hellbrook Trail was the most difficult up to the chin to Mount Mansfield? So Hellbrook Trail is actually a separate side trail on Mansfield, so didn't do that during my through hike, but it's in the same section that I descended, and that's definitely a very rugged section of trails, so probably. What would be your top can't miss trail spot and town spot? So my top can't miss trail spot would probably be a place called Sunset Rock, which is just before you get to Skyline Lodge, and I don't believe there's a sign for it or anything, but there's just a side trail off to the left as you're heading northbound. It's maybe like 0.1 off the trail, but I got there just around sunset and it was a very beautiful view. I would say take as many of the side trails as you can to any outlooks. It's usually worth it. So my top can't miss town spot would be the Mad Taco in Waitsfield. Good food. How many people did you see daily? So I would say I saw probably 6 to 10 average. Definitely varied, especially on days where I was going through more popular sections for day hikers. I might see a lot more, but on average, 6 to 10. Were there any other through hikers you saw consistently? The videos made it seem like there was never anyone around. Yes, so near the beginning, there was a guy that I kept running into. We stayed at a few of the shelters together, and we were going about the same mileage per day. I eventually got ahead of him, which was kind of the trend as I went through. I'd like catch up to some people and like be around them for a few days, and then I would like slowly creep ahead of them. But I definitely did see some other through hikers while I was out there. The next question is, did you hike in a small bubble? Which kind of goes with what I just said, but yes, there was probably about 12 people going northbound that were like within a few days of each other, and like I said, I kind of crept through that bubble as I went because I was going slightly faster than most people. There were a couple people that I never ended up catching up to, but I saw them in the shelter logs as I went along. But yeah, there was a small bubble. How many nights did you sleep in your tent versus in a shelter? So I actually slept 9 nights in each. This was surprising to me. I did not plan to stay in shelters really at all. But I did it on like night 3 and enjoyed it, and so I ended up doing it more, and there were just like a lot of really nice shelters that I didn't expect, so it ended up being more of a pattern. And then there were 3 nights that I spent in town when I did my resupplies as well. What was your favorite shelter on the long trail? I would have to say Butler Lodge was my favorite. Great sunset views there, up on the side of Mount Mansfield. There's a lot of good shelters around there, so it's hard, like there's a lot of good shelters to choose from, but that was probably my favorite. Also, Skyline Lodge was really nice as well. Was there any shelters that you chose not to stay in, but would have if you did it again? Yeah, so again, in the Mount Mansfield area, Puffer Shelter. is very nice. Not the shelter itself, it's just a simple lean-to style shelter, but the view just right out from the front of the shelter is incredible, and to stay there would be really nice for sunset or sunrise. Yeah, I would like to stay in that one. What piece of gear was your favorite? Probably my tent. I got it new for the trail, so it was a new piece of gear to me, and I just it was really easy to set up. I just enjoyed using it, so that's what I'd have to go with. Did you have any gear failures? Yes, I had 2 failures while I was on trail. The first was my spoon. I brought a plastic camping spoon that you can get at Walmart, and on day 4, I think it was, I noticed there was a big crack down the bowl of the spoon. So on my first resupply, I stopped into a gear shop and I got a titanium spoon, which lasted me the rest of the trail, of course. The other one was my trekking poles. I had the little button that locks the trekking poles when you extend them. That broke, and so I was able to make them work, but they did break during the trail. How did your water filtration system work for you? So I use the Cat9 B-Free filter system, and it worked great. I had used it before for all my other hiking stuff, and I did get a new filter cartridge before the trail just to maximize the flow rate, and it definitely did slow down over the course of the trail, especially after I had to filter some pond water because it was all I had for a water source. That definitely slowed it down quite a bit with the sediment, but overall it worked great for me. When I see how rocky the climbs are, I wonder about your choice of hiking shoes versus hiking boots to protect ankles. There's definitely a bit of a misconception that if you're hiking on rugged terrain, you need to have hiking boots or a hiking shoe that rides up over your ankles to give you ankle support, which some people that's really important for. I think it kind of depends person to person how strong of ankles you have. I've never had a problem with it, and trail runners are just most thru hikers are using trail runners nowadays. They're way lighter and they dry out quick, and there's just a lot of pros to them that I wouldn't really trade for the ankle support, and I've never had a problem with rolling my ankle or anything like that, so it's not an issue for me. What would you have liked to have or leave behind in terms of gear to make this hike lighter and more efficient? So a couple things I would leave behind probably would be my puffy jacket and my rain pants. Now, this is a hard one because it was September, so in other circumstances the puffy jacket could have been more necessary, but I hardly used it. I only used it a couple times during the trail, and it was just for comfort. I mean, I would have been fine if I didn't have it, but there definitely could be different scenarios in September where it would be more necessary. I just happened to get a really warm stretch, so I didn't really need it. The rain pants, again, I had a really dry stretch, but even so, even going into it, I kind of knew I might not use them a lot, but I brought them anyway. I probably could have just left them at home. I only used them a couple times. Did you ship food for your resupplies or shop local? I shop local for all my resupplies. I guess some people do ship boxes, but from what I researched ahead of time, it's more of a pain than it's worth unless you have very specific dietary restrictions. But I never had a problem shopping local and getting all my resupply stuff. So that's what I would recommend to most people. I'm planning a hike in 2025 and don't eat meat. How are the resupplies in terms of food variety? Real grocery stores are great for me, gas stations not so much. Yeah, so I think you would have a pretty easy time doing your resupplies. I know for me, Most of the places I resupplied in had like an actual grocery store. Manchester has a Shaw's. In Rutland, there's another grocery store. The Walmart isn't great, but there's another grocery store that has fresh produce and stuff. And then Waitsfield also has a Shaw's. The only resupply that I did that would probably not be great is Johnson. There's just a Dollar General, and there's a hardware store that sells like backpacking meals, so you might be able to get some like vegetarian backpacking meals, but that one would be a little bit harder. Otherwise, for the most part, there's a pretty good variety of stuff. Besides planning your hike, do you also plan different camera shots to keep your vlogs interesting? Yeah, so I kind of have a system that I've developed over my years of doing these videos, where in my head I kind of have a sequence, a rough sequence of the shots that I get, and I just kind of, as I hike, think about like what I need to get next, or what might be interesting for that particular scenario. But I try to switch it up between, locked off tripod shots and holding the camera and showing the trail, but I'm definitely thinking about that as I'm going along and hiking. Were you surprised at how quickly you finished the trail, or was 22 days planned? So I kind of had a time constraint to get it done, but I think I was figuring more like 24 days was kind of my realistic expectation. I was hopeful that I could do it in roughly 3 weeks, but when I calculated out each day, which I did do ahead of time, as well as my resupplies, it was more like 24 days. So I did shave off a couple days, which was good. When I planned it out, I planned some days shorter, and then I found out I could actually do more miles. So I'd say I did it a little faster than I expected, but overall, it was about in the time frame that I planned. What was the greatest physical challenge? Probably hiking through the humidity. It got really hot and humid. I mean, it got up in the 80s and really high humidity. Going up Mansfield on the way up to Butler Lodge was extremely difficult. I remember having to sit down multiple times and just take a break because I just did not feel like pushing up the climb. It definitely put an extra strain on my body, but it didn't stop me. It just slowed me down. What was the greatest mental challenge? So probably on that day that I hit Main Junction and went to the Sunrise Shelter, that section was one of the most mentally challenging days, and I think it was just going up and down and not hitting any kind of landmarks. I wasn't reaching the top of any mountains. I wasn't getting any views. So that just made it hard to keep pushing on, knowing that I wasn't really getting anywhere in particular that day, and feeling like I was racing against the clock because I started late that day. So that made that a very mentally challenging day. And then to factor into what I said about the physical challenge, just hiking through that humidity was not just physically challenging, but it was also mentally challenging. Was this easier or harder than you expected, and why? So I would say a little bit of both. I definitely surprised myself in ways that I was able to push on, in how it was easier than I thought it would be, but it was also very challenging. I would say I kind of had my expectations set that it was going to be hard, so if anything it was easier, but it was a big challenge for sure. What was your greatest fear before your hike and as you carried it out? So before my hike, I think my two biggest fears were not being able to hike that many days in a row and enjoy it. I had never done that much before, so I didn't know if I would still enjoy it after. a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And then the second thing would be that there was just going to be a ton of rain and it was going to be really mentally challenging. But the opposite of that happened, so that was good. During my hike, I would say probably just that something was going to happen. I was going to get injured or something and I wasn't going to be able to finish the trail. It was really important to me that I would actually make it to Canada, so I guess if I had a fear during the hike itself, it was just like getting injured and not being able to finish. What would you change about your hike? If I would change anything, and I enjoyed the experience the way it was, so I wouldn't necessarily change anything, but if I would probably just give myself more time. Like, I really enjoyed pushing myself and doing some big mile days, but there were probably some of those days that I would have liked to just do a shorter day and, stay with the people I was hiking with, or just get to spend more time at the viewpoints, and not push so hard to try to make up time and hit a preconceived deadline. What about this experience gave you the greatest joy? Being in the mountains is one of my favorite places to be, so I would say just being in the mountains day after day after day was incredible, and just getting to live out there, to adjust and to kind of adapt to that lifestyle, it brought me a lot of joy. What were the most difficult challenges getting to and from the trailhead during town stops? Hitchhiking was quite harder than I expected. From what I had heard ahead of time, I felt like it was going to be a little bit easier, but then I did have a few times where I was struggling to get a ride, and I did have some very nice people pick me up, but there were times that it was hard to get that ride. So I would say, if possible, if you have a little extra money, just hire a shuttle driver, because there are lots of different shuttle drivers throughout the state that are, they're familiar with the Long Trail through hikers, and they're there to give you rides. So if you can arrange a ride that way, I would recommend it. Or maybe if you stay at a hostel and they offer rides if you're staying at their hostel, try to set that up, because hitchhiking is not always reliable. How did you leave the northern terminus, and was that hard to plan? So I got a shuttle to pick me up from the northern terminus. You just hike out 1.3 miles out to a parking lot, and that's the closest point to get picked up. The Green Mountain Club has a list of shuttle drivers. If you just send them an email, you can get them to send that list to you. That's what I did, and I called the first number and they were available to do it for me. So it wasn't really that hard to plan. It was more just the thought of it that was a little bit stressful for me, but then once I actually did it, it was easy. The people were super nice that picked me up and gave me a ride to Burlington, and I would recommend just getting that list and getting someone to give you a ride. Okay, so this question goes with the last question, and it's, how did you manage to get back to your car in Mass? So, like I said, I had the shuttle driver that took me from the northern terminus to Burlington, Vermont, and then in Burlington I got a bus that took me most of the way down into southern Vermont, and then I hired another shuttle to drive me 30 minutes from where the bus took me back to my car. It's definitely a little tricky getting from one end of the state to the other if you have left your vehicle. I found that the full-length shuttles that you could hire, if you just hired one person, were very expensive. So if you're trying to save money, taking the bus in between might be a cheaper option, although it's a little bit trickier because you have to hitch multiple rides together and have those all line up. But that's what I did, and it worked for me. And the last question is, any tips you'd recommend for a new backpacker on their first through hike? Listen, the best tip I can give you is just go do it. At some point, all the planning, all the gear, there's only so much you can do. You just have to get out there and see what you're capable of. I bet you'll be surprised at what you're capable of. I know I surprised myself with how many miles I could do and just what I could endure. The best thing you can do is just go do it and just enjoy the time, soak it in, don't overthink it too much, and just try to soak it all in. Well guys, that is all your questions on the long trail through hike. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions. I really appreciate it. I hope I was able to answer and help you out as best I could. If you are doing a through hike of the Vermont Long Trail next year, drop it in the comments down below. I'm so excited for you. But thank you for watching, and until next time, stay inspired, stay creative, and I will see you in the next video. See you later.